Hello. Today is Thursday, October 31st, 2024. This is a sideshow. I'm Theodore Parker and coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, USA. Weather-wise, today the high will be 77. Currently the temperature is 65 degrees, feels like 64. And afternoon showers are in the forecast. Again, highs in the upper 70s and lows in the low 50s. Rain possible this afternoon. And watching for tropical development in the Caribbean. Today, it's a little bit before 8 p.m. Sunrise will be at 8:03 a.m. here on the East Coast. Sunset at 6:39 p.m. The wind today will be about 11 miles per hour. The AQI is good at 34 and pollen is low. Again, this is a sideshow. I'm Theodore Parker. And if you are watching, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Halloween. Whether it's a tradition that's been passed down or something that you just are fresh to celebrating. According to the last census and where we are now, there are over 7 billion people on this planet worldwide. So I thought I would take the opportunity to present to you an article that details the true history of Halloween and its most haunted traditions. And surprisingly enough, it blends some of the cultures that we have today. So, I'm going to share it with you. The true history of Halloween and its most haunted traditions. Picture this. A roaring bonfire, spooky snacks, and endless ghost stories being told. Sounds like the perfect All Hallows Eve, right? But just where exactly did all that Halloween candy and ghostly lore come from? And who decided that carving pumpkins, bobbing for apples, and dressing up on October 31st were stable traditions of spooky season? If you're wondering about all that and then some, you'll want to keep reading to find out the true history of Halloween and all of its terrifying traditions. Speaking of terrifying, you'll also find out about all the scary superstitions associated with the holiday, like why black cats are considered bad luck, as well as how the colors black and orange became quintessential to the holiday ahead. And it all traces back to the origins of Halloween. In short, this ancient holiday goes back to the Celts of Europe. The costumes, bonfires, ghosts, and eerie tales all play a significant role in that rich history. Interestingly, trick-or-treating and neighborhood gatherings are relatively modern additions. But more on these Halloween facts below, starting with where it all began. What is the real story behind Halloween? The origins of Halloween date all the way back to the Celts of ancient Ireland, who celebrated the new year on November 1st. That day marked the transition from the warm, fruitful summer months to the cold and dark winter, a period that was most often associated with death. So on October 31st, the night before the new year, they celebrated what was known as, cue the spooky voice, Samhain. It was a night when the boundary between the living world and the world of the dead became thin, and ghosts could return to walk the earth, or so they believed. These meddlesome ghosts damaged crops and caused trouble. but the blurred line to the spirit world also made it easier for Celtic priests to make predictions about the coming year. How did Halloween traditions start and why? Those same prophecy-speaking priests commemorated the night by building huge bonfires that became the hub for evening activities. People gathered around in costume to disguise themselves from ghosts and tried to tell each other's fortunes, enjoyed a big feast, and made lanterns out of gourds. Sound familiar? Here's another bit of info. Those big bonfires attracted insects, which then attracted bats. And that's why the flying critters are now associated with the holiday. These pagan traditions continued until Christianity extended its influence into the Celtic lands, and the celebration became generally toned down. The name Halloween came from the Christian All Souls Day celebration, also known as All Hallows. And since All Hallows was on November 1st, folks began to call Samhain All Hallows Eve. That name was eventually shortened to Halloween. Now, what about some of the other Halloween traditions you know and love? When it comes to bobbing for apples, you can possibly attribute their introduction to early Roman conquest and the Romans' own fall holiday, which was symbolized by an apple. As for black cats, the idea of being spooked by the felines actually has roots in the Middle Ages. Back then, many believed that witches avoided detection by turning themselves into black cats. Then there's the traditional Halloween colors of black and orange. This theme once again dates back to the Celtic festival of Samhain. For the Celts, black symbolized the death of summer, while orange represented the harvest season. How did Halloween become an American holiday? The Halloween that you know today is a result of the great American immigrant melting pot. At first, celebrations were pretty limited in colonial New England, as the Puritans weren't on board with the holiday's pagan roots. Because of this, Halloween was more common in Maryland and the southern colonies. But as different European ethnic groups began to mix, a distinctly American version began with public events to celebrate the harvest. Neighbors would gather at these play parties to share stories of the dead, also known as ghost stories, and enjoy some mischief making. See, it was not until a large wave of Irish and Scottish immigrants came over during the 19th century that the holiday became widely celebrated across the country. Historians estimate that by the early 20th century, Halloween was celebrated across North America by most everyone. What's the history of Halloween costumes and trick-or-treating? Wondering how trick-or-treating came about? Well, there's actually several theories about that. One idea is that the custom came from Ireland, where young people once took part in a tradition called goozing, where they would dress in costume and then sing, tell a joke, or perform another sort of trick before collecting a treat of fruit, nuts, or coins. There's also the act of souling, which traces back to the 15th century Christians who would go door to door asking for treats or soul cakes. They would take these pastries in exchange for a promise to pray for the souls of those homeowners' dead relatives. Later, American children took a note out of the European book and began going door to door asking for treats. Speaking of treats, you might be wondering where candy corn came from. Today, the tricolored candy is a symbol of Halloween, but it hasn't always been that way. The birth of candy corn can be traced back to the 1880s Philadelphia, where a candy maker at the Wonder Roll Candy Company was said to have invented it, and that's spelled Wundere. This was only the beginning, though. In 1898, the Golditz Company began to produce candy corn on a wider scale, dubbing it chicken feed, leading to an increase in popularity. This all peaked in the 1950s when candy corn's identity as a Halloween staple became solidified in the USA. As the more serious life or death parts of the Celtic traditions began to fade, new lighthearted variations emerged. Fortune telling, for example, turned into bobbing for apples, in which women could find out which suitor, the apple, she would eventually bite into, as in marry, and here there's a laughing emoji in parentheses. Young Irish and Scottish kids helped bring about the tradition of costumes. The pranksters went from dressing up as priests to putting together scarier creatures intended to spook the neighborhood. As for carving pumpkins, the Irish had a custom of carving scary faces into turnips or potatoes and placing them near doorways and windows to frighten away wandering spirits. One of those spirits is known as Stingy Jack, a man who outsmarts the devil and avoids hell. Because of this, his soul cannot go to heaven, and he instead wanders the earth. In trying to avoid Jack and his sinful dealings, the Irish idea of jack-o'-lanterns came to be. In time, the Irish brought this tradition with them to America and found that pumpkins, a fruit native to America, make for even better jack-o'-lanterns. Eventually, the games, mischief-making, and hunt for sweets all melded together into trick-or-treating. And the whole thing became more about community than anything else. By the time the 20th century rolled around, it was an essential secular holiday centered on neighborhood get-togethers and parties. Today, Americans still love Halloween and put modern twists on their celebrations. You can find the most haunted states and visit their haunted houses or a corn maze, or even order your state's most popular candy to leave at your door. Interesting facts, Halloween. Speaking of scary things, I thought I would also add this, since the holiday is mostly celebrated by children. So, let me see. I guess I'll have to ask the question, as I did previously. What things should not be done to children? So, that in itself is kind of scary. What should you not do to your kids? And it's on the list of 7 things your kids should never do. So here it is. What should you not do to your kids? Scary. Yelling at your children, swearing and cursing in front of them, letting them get away with things you know they shouldn't, giving them everything they ask for, not teaching them the value of money, not teaching them fairness, kindness, and compassion, not teaching them to respect themselves and others. And as always, because they are little people, you want to always treat them as if a big person should not take advantage. So I thought I would put that in there because we as parents have to remember that when we first brought them home from the hospital and they could not do for themselves, all the way from K to 12th, sometimes college and university, that they are still our responsibility. So all that is covered. And if you're not a parent and have to interact with children, then still be aware that they are little people, especially when you have to send them off to school every day. That's it. Hashtag.